So let me just, maybe this will help. Actually, I do need to plug in. Okay, so I get to see my kitchen. Maybe it'll be helpful because it'll be closer over to the Wi-Fi. 1 second. Okay, I'm coming around over here. All right, hopefully that's better. All right. Okay, you can see the wall of fame of artwork over here over my shoulder. Okay. All right, so better?
Yeah, could you repeat the last point you made?
Yes. So again, it may be that what makes this gzera, what makes this gzera what it is that it's more about ourselves, not about what other people will think about us. It's that if I heat something in a particular way, which is normally how I would cook an item, even though it's fully cooked, it may be that one time, I'll give you your medicines over there. Sorry. Over there on that side of the table. Sorry, we're all sick. Yeah, you can drink it. The fear is here that one time I will actually cook inappropriately. I will actually reheat something that's not fully cooked, and thus I will violate the Isser of Bishul. That could be the genesis of this Gzeira. And again, I have not seen that, explicitly written, but that may be more so the reason than like a Marisayan kind of thing. Okay.
So a warming drawer is never a problem because you can't cook in it.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Yes. Correct. Right. Nobody would ever in their right mind cook in that sort of contraption. Again, that's why I have a warming tray, right? On my counter back there, we have a warming tray that we use for Shabbos day. Nobody cooks on a warming tray. It's not something people do. Could you, in theory, if it gets hot enough? Maybe, but nobody does it. It's not about can it cook, is that do people cook? Okay. Aval, the Shulchan Aruch says, lehatmin tacha sabigodim hanesunim al gabe hamecham v'adai aser. But to do hatmana, which again it keeps coming up, though we haven't talked about the topic of hatmana, which is a problem. If you do it underneath clothing that is on top of a mecham, a kettle, so you have a kettle, and then on top of the kettle you, let's say, have a pot, but you envelop the pot in a blanket, let's say. V'adai aser. Now you say, well, you have a double thing here, no one cooks in that way, but it's not about cooking here, it's about hatmana. There's no you can't do hatmana, period. You can't envelop a pot, even in a double situation where you have a pot on top of another pot, where you might say that it's not normal to cook in such a way. Okay, let's now continue with the Ramah. We did one line of the Ramah at the very end last time. I went back to look at the YouTube. V'hu adin, says the Ramah, she'aseh lahanicho al gabe ikira afilu grufo ketuma delo hitiru ela chazara u'chederech shenizbar. Have a good day at school, okay? Okay. This is also the law that it's prohibited to place on top of a kira. Right, remember that's the oven with the two holes on top. Even if the kira was grufa ketuma, you had rake the coals to the side, out, or you cover the coals in ash. Because chazara is only permissible in the ways that we've talked about, right, over the last number of shiurim. That chazara has certain conditions. If I'm going to return food to the fire on Shabbos, I have to meet those. So if I meet those, great. The other way to get around it is if it's ein derech bishul bekach and grufa kutum. That's what we've learned here in this siman. But just to place it on top of a kira, well, that's derech bishul bekach. That is how people would have cooked using a kira, by putting it over top of one of those open holes at the top of the kira. So let's take a look at Peites in the Mishnah Berurah. She'aseh lahanicho. Okay. V'hanacha lechatchila b'Shabbos aser afilu hu adayin rotech u'mitztamik baralo. And again, placing food anew on in a place where it's normal to cook, lechatchila, right? I'm just going to put it there, right? Let's say it was fully cooked, right? And it's mitztamik baralo, right? And it's, by the way, it's still boiling. So let's say I didn't meet one of the conditions of chazara. Let's say I put it down on the ground. Right? Well, that's one of our conditions of chazara. In my mind, I was done putting it on the heat source. Right? Pick one of the conditions of chazara, and assume that you decided I'm not putting it back. 5 minutes later, while this thing is still piping hot, I decide to put it back on top of the kira. That's not allowed because it's a new. I'm placing it anew. It's not returning into the fire because that previous the previous situation is over, right? Whether it started as shahiyah and then it continued on to Shabbos. This is not called chazara. Chazara is when I'm returning it to the fire and I meet the conditions. So here, the assumption is that I am placing it on there, and the chazara conditions were not met. Okay, that was really just kind of a review, honestly, of things we've done. Okay, so also I feel who adayin rotech, we start around. Okay, good. Now let's go to the next sentence in the Ramah. Okay. V'yesh matirim litein letoch tanur she'afu vo miba'od yom dema'achar shelo hitminu vo rak afu vo miba'od yom lo nishar ba'u rak hevel ma'at ve'ein lochosh livishul u'vavad shelo nitztanen legamre. So there are those who permit placing within a tanur that you had baked in Friday afternoon, maybe Ojo, maybe before Shabbos started, you had baked in this oven. I don't know here that we're talking about the Talmudic tanur. I think the word tanur here is being used more generically as oven, just based on context. Because since after you didn't do hatmana within this oven, you just simply baked in it before Shabbos, right? You didn't bake it and then, do something where you enveloped it to insulate it so that this food item would stay very hot for a lengthy period of time. You didn't do that here on Friday. Lo nisha bo rak hevel ma'at and lachush levishul. So since you didn't create a situation where this oven was right, where the heat source kind of kept going at a very high rate, right? Where you're doing hatmana there, so you did something inside this oven to make it that it's super hot. Rather, there's just a little bit of hevel left, a little bit of of the air, the moisture, not a tremendous or really steam, I should say. Hevel really means steam. Ve'ein lachosh levishul. And we're not supposed to, and so you don't need to be concerned that you're gonna have bishul here. It's so low, the temperature, so low, right? I didn't turn it super high that I could do hatmana in it. It's a low temperature. So here we have a yesh matirin that that if you baked in this oven Friday and there's some residual heat that's left, not a tremendous amount, you can place it into the oven according to this opinion. Residual heat. Again, not that it's on, I think probably the fire is off, but you have some residual heat, nothing that you could ever cook in it. It's ein derech bishul in the sense that there's no heat here, that it's not hot enough to cook. If it was, a different story. So you have a yesh matir in here. Now, he does qualify one thing here. It says, but it cannot have cooled down completely. So if your food is completely cooled down and you return it into this type of an oven, which is hanging on to a little bit of hevel, a little bit of steam, but really not enough that it could cook anything, that's still a problem according to even this permissive opinion. And we'll see why in just a moment from the Mishnah Berurah. So let's take a look at Tzadi and Tzadi Aleph. Okay, Sadi says, litoch, litain litoch v'chulei. Hainu, shenosein b'shabes baboker b'sochatan or atavshil shnizbasol kadei sheyischame. This is the case. The Mishnah wants to clarify. What's the case that was just described in the Ramah here? So he says, it is where you place on Shabbos morning, you place the food inside the oven that was already cooked in order to reheat the food. Usually we say even if you place it inside a kira that is garuf akatum, it's not okay because you're placing it inside the oven. Can't even do chazara there. Forget it's nothing that doesn't get off the ground typically. The eino motor rak al gabai. When you reheat things, even for chazara, it has to be al gaba v'lo betoch hatanor. It has to be on top, but not on, which we talked about previously. It has to be on top, not within the tanor. So he says here, why is this different? So since you didn't leave food in there from before Shabbos, and meaning you kept it very hot in this oven, rather you baked something in there before Shabbos started. The next morning, I'm surprised that there's anything left in there, but there's some minimal heat. Chom muat, a little bit of heat. It doesn't appear as if you're cooking. You have a little bit of heat. I'm not sure how much you're accomplishing with this, by the way. This sounds like a lot of headache for very little, very little that will get accomplished, that will get heated up. But okay. Where am I here? So if, let's say, you did hatmana, let's say you kept the oven, the fire going strong, into Shabbos, and there were things that were that the heat of the oven was much higher. The nefish hable the tanur. The tanur there's a lot of steam going on in there. It's a much hotter temperature. Then of course it's nothing to talk about here about the morning. You can't place it into the oven. You can't heat it up in that situation because you have a situation of derech bishul bekach, because it is very hot in there and one could cook that way under no other circumstances. The cholze hula hakolbo. That's all according to the opinion of the Ashkenazi Rishon the Kolbo. Aval b'darchei Moshe v'chei meharama. Now, what's funny is if you read this comment, you might think that the Darkei Moshe and the Ramah are two different people, but they're the same person. The Darkei Moshe was written by Rav Moshe Isserlis. The Ramah was written by Rav Moshe Isserlis. Darkei Moshe was his work that he put together prior to the Ramah. He was trying to do what the Beis Yosef beat him to the punch to, which was to write a whole halacha sefer. And then I think he writes in the introduction about how his world shook when he heard that the Rav Yosef Cairo had just put out something that he was in the middle of trying to do, but he still wrote something. Okay, he changed his work, but then he also did this work on the Shulchan Aruch. So in both of his works here, Le'el, the Sif Beis, the Ramawi in Sif Beis, the Haggah, and the Gloss, Muchach denogim lahakel lahachzir letoch hatanur b'chol gavni. He says here, and this is the point that I had to then go back and clarify with my Rebbe a few times back when we were learning, which is that the Ramah had said, well, there seems to be a practice to be lenient to return food into the tanur, and there he was talking about akira. B'chol gavne, in all situations, you could return it to inside the oven. He does say there the tov lahachmer is better machmer, but he seems to indicate that there's some sort of minhag. So my understanding after having reviewed this with my Rebbe was, and I think I shared this with everybody a few weeks back, that the consensus of poskim today is that because of the power of our ovens that can get to high temperatures with great ease, the ovens that we have are treated more like the Talmudic tanur, where there's no discussion of putting it back in to the tanur, even according to this lenient minhag of the Rama. Different though, then we'll talk about this case probably I think in the next siman. You can leave food in the oven from before Shabbos. Some people like to make a cholent this way. We will talk about this case. You want to make a cholent in the oven, you leave it in the oven all the way till Shabbos day. That is going to be allowed. Okay, that is going to be permissible. But to return food into the oven, leaving aside the other challenges that may come along with that, let's say you can control that variable. The problem is that the consensus of modern day poskim is to treat our ovens like the tanur because of their great effectiveness to get hot, that was the description of the Talmudic tanur. The Talmudic tanur will get very hot because it had a very narrow top to it, and so therefore the connection has been drawn. Whether that was drawn in error or you disagree with them, I could hear a case being made. I'm merely the shaliach who's reporting what the consensus is right now.
The question I have is on the modern oven. You set it in Shabbos mode. Once you set it on Friday, you're not going to change it on Shabbos. Right. Then you set it at the lowest temperature possible. It's not like in the old days, can warm up. This is going to stay at that temperature. So I think the comparison to the Talmudic time, it doesn't work here, because you're not going to change it on Shabbos. If you change it on Shabbos, you're not even talking about anything here. But you don't change it on Shabbos. If you set it at the lowest temperature, it's not going to heat up no matter how fast it can heat up. It's going to stay at the low temperature.
It's also not like the tanur that we're talking about, because when you set it in Shabbos mode, it's not residual heat. It will maintain a constant temperature. So that's that difference.
So it's different. Well. It's different in that sense.
Right.
Yes. Right. It's not like the case that was described here of the heter was like the fire's off, nothing's going on in there. It's just that the heat is kind of sticking around. By the way, there's no reason to think that such a case couldn't come up on a Friday night. To me, Shabbos morning is a little ridiculous that you'll still have some heat in there. But to your point, Tommy, the reality though is that the Talmudic tanur, you could probably control the heat in there as well, depending on how much fuel you put into the bottom of the oven. But the reality is that you could get it very high if you so choose to. So the rabbis of the Gemara made the calculation on that. They made the decision that all bets are off, even if, let's say, you have it. Just sort of straight up halacha from the Gemara that a Talmudic tanur, the halacha is no matter what the level of heat is, you cannot return it into the tanur. So the rabbis of now, or the poskim of today, are saying yes, you could keep it on a low setting and even control it in some ways, because we have, unlike where you have the days of old where you had to refuel you had to put more coals, whatever, the fire was a little less in your control. Here you could just set the temperature from beforehand. Still, if the claim is going to be that it is a tanur, then no matter what the heat is, even if it's such a low temperature, then the halacha sort of remains that you can't use it on the inside. I hear the frustration though. I hear the frustration in the sense that they've created these Shabbos mode ovens. You should know that one of the biggest frustrations that I think that rabbis have is sometimes that there's a misperception about the Shabbos mode oven. Really, a Shabbos mode oven should be more aptly named a Yontiv oven. That is when it really comes in very handy. The Shabbos, calling it Shabbos mode. And by the way, there are people who have expressed this to me, not just this year, the bewilderment that they would call it a Shabbos mode after they discovered that it doesn't truly help them on Shabbos. So it may help you, by the way. The one case where it helped you is in the case of Shehiyah, Friday afternoon into Shabbos. Though you could probably figure out other ways to do it without getting a fancy schmancy oven. But for Yontif, it's very helpful. For Yontif, I admit, it's a very helpful contraption. I'm just going to pick up my baby. I'm listening. I can hear. Hinda, you have a question?
Yeah, in reality, Um, if you set your Shabbos mode oven to 200 or 180 to 200, oh, so cute. It's no different from a warming drawer. If you do the Garafukatum thing, like you paste over the controls, it's exactly like a warming drawer. It'll just keep a constant low temperature. So what's the difference there on Shabbos?
So the difference is that we wouldn't call the warming drawer a tanur, right? That even though it might be sort of connected to the overall contraption of the oven, that is a separate. I mean, it is a separate piece, even if you do have it attached to your, underneath your ovens or ovens. It's a separate piece, and we wouldn't even call that we wouldn't even compare that to a kira. I think that is just an abnormal way to cook. You would never cook in that. But a tanur, for sure, Talmudic tanur for sure is and if we're going to say our ovens are like that, the inside of an oven, then it would be problematic.
This goes back.
But why does the terminology matter if the physics are exactly the same?
Remember a while ago, you asked the question about somebody who had a light in the oven, and the oven's off, but there's a light in the oven, and that provides some heat. And Rabbi Klinger, you said that's not good because putting anything in the oven, which is like cooking, and it's like you would do during the week to cook, was not permitted. So this whole discussion goes back to that. We don't need to worry about the temperature in the oven or anything like that. You're just saying don't use the oven because it looks like you're cooking.
Yes, correct. Yes, but there was a kula here, right? Where this whole discussion kind of took off was a little bit. The Ramah had mentioned this leniency of even with inside the kira, you could return food in certain circumstances. But correct, Steve, because we're calling a tanur, it's off limits because it's a normal way to cook. There was an exception case perhaps drawn, not everyone agrees to this, but the Ramah had mentioned it, where inside the kira, if you go back even to Sif Beis, you back up in your Shulchan Aruch. I'm just pulling it back up. Where is it here? This is Sif Aleph. Right here. Where is it? He had said that, right? There he had said that and then the Mishnah Berurah clarified that you put it inside the oven, right? And he even talks about here that was the case where the word cholent came up, right? That's by Akira. There was this one exception that was kind of drawn out that apparently was the minhag. I just want to point it out, by the way. The Ramah wouldn't report that there was a minhag if it wasn't the actual practice. But again, the poskim of today, whether you want to call them too machmir, I could hear that, by the way, are saying that our ovens are not what the oven of 500 years ago in Krakow, what was going on in 500-600 years ago in Krakow. So I hear everybody's point. These are the conclusions that are drawn based again on what we're on some of the modern day poskim. Again, the biggest thing is that they call our ovens, they equate them to the Talmudic Tanur. Again, I hear the frustrations of because you can control the oven part, you can control the bottom part, you can even make the same temperature. But the biggest difference, as Steve pointed out, is that the tanur, the oven part, that you cook in, right? And typically there are no exceptions except maybe akira. And the warming drawer is not normally used for cooking. So therefore it's going to be permitted. Okay. Hopefully that was clear, even if we disagree, which is fine. Hopefully that's at least clear what we've said so far. All right, let's learn a little bit more here. Sadi Aleph, legamre, right? This idea that it's not allowed legamre. The im haya hatav shel mitztane legamre, because even according to the lenient opinion, if the food is fully cooled down, kaimalan the yesh bo od mishum bishul ve'osel haniach afilu betanur kazeh. If it's fully cooled down, then even that low heat oven, which was, something was baked there, right before Shabbos, and in the morning, apparently there's still some residual heat, but not a lot. If the food is completely cooled down, and I'll add here, and it's a liquid, right? Then there's the potential of yesh bishul achar bishul. There is a potential to halachically cook again. And therefore, since it may reach the temperature of yad saledetbo, where your hand, you're so scalding, you would just move your hand away. Therefore, they even the lenient opinion here is stringent when it comes to this. Now, of course, that means that if it were not liquid, according to this lenient opinion, the inference here is that it should be okay. Again, this is dealing with a kira, which again, not going to help us practically speaking, but anyways, nonetheless, important to learn all the halacha. But that's the lenient opinion. If you look back now in the Ramah, 3 lines from the bottom where we left off, the yesh machmirim bazeh. There are those that are strict about this whole question. The machom kolkach batanor shahayad seledes though. Also, some are machmir on this question. If the heat is such that the heat inside the oven is yad soledes, which is kind of similar to what the Mishnah Berurah just said, that even the lenient opinion would kind of agree with this. Let's take a look here at Tzadi Gimel. Tzadi Beis. Bazeh ta'amam. Why are they strict? The chazar latoch hatanur la'olam asher, because you can never return food inside a tanur. It's never allowed according to this strict opinion. Okay, and that's even a kira, by the way, according to this more strict opinion. Okay. Whether there's a lot of heat or a little bit of heat in the tanur, the rabbis didn't start making differentiations between temperatures. If it's 136, that's okay. If it's 137, not okay. They didn't make such differentiations. You can't return it into a tanur according to this more strict opinion. Again, I'm acknowledging in Akira there is a more lenient opinion that does exist, but this is the machmir opinion, which even the Ramah at the end, by the way, it's supposed to be machmir, but the minhag was not so. Ein alav shem tanur shehusa klal. Nevertheless, it's dafka, specifically if there is the heat from the tanur is yad soledes bo, is that enough it could burn you, or you have to pull your hand away. The ilav hachi, because if that was not true, ein alav shem tanur shehusa klal. Then what we're talking about is not a tanur, even though it's a physical tanur. If it's 85 degrees in your oven, again, I'm not sure why this helps you in the first place, but if it's even 100 degrees in your oven, if it was 100 degrees, right, he's saying that it's right. When is this a problem? It's all when it's yad soledes bo. If it's not yad soledes bo, then it's not. It doesn't have a shame tanur on it right now, right? Shehusak klal that was lit, right? It was lit a long time ago, and now it's the temperature is decreasing. It's not a lot of heat in there, anyways. Again, on a practical level, I'm not sure how that's going to help you reheat food, and get it to whatever temperature you probably want to get it to. Okay, but in theory, that would allow you to put it even back in the oven if there's such a low heat. I don't believe. Maybe I'm wrong. I think most people estimate yad soledes bo as 120 or 100, somewhere in that range of what maybe a little bit higher than that. I don't know that you have ovens that even if you can control the setting, do they go down to like 100? Can you even set an oven for 100 or 125? I don't think you can, right? I know in my oven you can't, but I don't know if they make fancier ovens that do. No, not sure. Okay, so may not be a practical may not practically help you here. Okay, last comment, then we'll stop for today. Tzadi Gimel, v'im chom kol kach v'chulei tzarich lomar shim hachom v'chulei. If the heat is such that it's a yad soledes bo, the Ramah said it's also dilav hachi. Because if that were not the case, afila hayesh machmirim shari. Even the machmir opinion would say it's fine because we're talking about less than yad soledes. L'chein sasem haramah is l'el v'sof sivbeis b'haga And that seems what the Ramah had said at the end of Siv Beis, that if it's less than Yad Soledes, well, there's nothing to talk about here, because that's not a shame tanur. It's not, again, no one can cook in a less than Yad Soledes bow situation if the fire is off and it's just kind of cooling down slowly. So in theory, that you could, then even the Machmir opinion would be permissive of putting it in the oven. Okay, so let's pause here.
By the way, my oven can be set for 80 because it has a
80.
proof. Because it has a proof where you proof your dough, your yeast dough.
Oh,
So it can be set to 80.
okay, there you go. So that's interesting. So if it's going to be set to 80, it's a good question. Can you then do that for Shabbos? I will ask. 1 second. I'm going to write this down. That's a really great question.
I mean, I don't need it because I have a warming drawer, but still.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? If probably wouldn't even be practical anyways. You'd really end up heating anything up at 80 degrees, but it wouldn't actually be practical.
It would be like leaving it outside on a sunny day. It would be warm.
Right.
It would be better
right.
than cold.
Incrementally warmer.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll ask. I just want to make sure that I'm not misinterpreting here. Okay, so we're gonna pause here. We'll pick up next time with to continue this, the Ramah's discussion here. He's got a lot to say. And next thing he's going to talk about is an important rule about that if you can't do something on Shabbos, you're not allowed to ask a non-Jew to do something. That same something. So he's going to in the context of this whole discussion, he's going to talk about asking a non-Jew to do some of these things. Can you do that? Can you not do that? So if you don't want to hear that next week, so don't tune in. But I'm warning you, it's not going to be lenient. That topic of Amir Lanachri is often one where there's probably too many coolers that are flying around that are not based on the text. So we'll continue with that next week.